Hey Frank,
Hello, Amanda. How are you doing?
good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited. It's Friday.
I know, me too.
Let's
And we're
hope.
talking about building a brand, which is always fun to talk about.
My favorite topic.
Last time we talked about purpose and vision a little bit. Can you refresh my memory on what we talked about?
Yes, yes, yes. So, for those who listened to the first one, if you did, we're kind of in a series right now that's talking about how to build a brand, right? The essentials of building a brand. First part that we talked about in the previous video, feel free to go do that. I think we'll try and link that maybe in the notes if we can, is brand vision and purpose. So that's really just the overarching foundational belief about your company's reason for existing. Why do you exist beyond money? And that's just important because if you really don't know that, there's going to be you might feel really lost as an organization. People are going to have a hard time engaging, and so it's really important to know your company's mission, your vision, your purpose. Right? That's really just what we talked about last time, and everything you do needs to tie back into that. So that's a recap of last time. But today, like you said, we're talking about brand identity, which is a little bit closer to the surface. So I'm excited about that.
Well, I am too. But before we even dive in, like, what is brand identity?
Brand identity. Well, I'm actually going to start with what it's not in the context of what we're saying. I'll just be
Mhm.
really clear. There's the way people sometimes reference design or like your aesthetic is, or your brand is like your brand identity. That's not what we're talking about. And I actually think that's inaccurate, and some language around that is shifting. We call that visual brand identity, or like visual or brand design,
Mhm.
because that's really a part of your identity. It's just the look and feel. But brand
Mhm.
identity, it really has three pillars. There are three pillars of brand that I think are important to understand brand identity. You have your brand image, and I can share a little bit more of a visual here that might be helpful.
Sure.
You have your brand image, which is who you are now, how people perceive you as it is right now today. And then you have your brand identity, and that's much more aspirational, right? It's how you want to be perceived in the future. This generally can span over, the next couple of months, all the way into the next couple of years. It's aspirational in its future thinking. That line in the middle is brand strategy. It's everything that you need to get from brand image to brand identity. That could be creative, positioning, capital allocation, investments, product service development, all those things. So just to recap that, you have a brand image, and that's
Mhm.
your image and perception as it is today, as it stands. Your brand identity is aspirational, and your brand strategy is everything you do in between to get from brand image to brand identity. Ultimately, your brand identity should become your brand image at some point. That's the goal. That's the hope behind doing a lot of this, right? Um, but then, like, what is a brand identity? So I think it's helpful to understand what do you do to actually shape that brand identity and build that out. And so I'll share a little bit of a visual of how we use that construct and what that model looks like. So for us, like I said, we use a model by David Aker. You'll see this in some of his work, and it's just a framework. It's not that really critical of what it looks like, but it's more so how it helps you organize thoughts. And so this is actually like something we've done internally as an agency. We've done this for clients as well, but it's a really helpful tool to understand brand identity. So it just basically has three layers. You have your brand essence, your core identity, and your extended identity. Your brand essence is just who you are what is the controlling philosophy of your brand, right? Who do you want to become as your identity? How do you want to be known? Ideally, this is probably not something you say about yourself, but hopefully it's along the lines of what others are saying about you after you behave this way for a certain amount of time. And so for us, that's hopefully we're brilliant problem solvers, right? We want to be known for solving problems on a variety of levels. And then you have your core identity. And these are those really more tactical and tangible things about your brand that help you differentiate and find relevance, even sustainability within your market. And so for us, that's a couple dynamics of our team that we're looking at as like, hey, we are a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts, right? So like there's a lot of other companies that might be brilliant problem solvers, but this is how we do that uniquely. And then the most outer layer that we have here is you see brand as person, product, organization, and symbol. It's just a way to view your brand from if it was a person at a party, what would they be like, right? How do you behave? What are some of the attributes and personalities that you take on? The product that can be seen as like, hey, what's your kind of hero product? What do people really go to you for to purchase?
Mhm.
Brand as organization, that's internal. How do you behave internally? What attracts people to you? And then brand as symbol. You'll see we put to be determined, but that can just be for Nike, that's the swoosh. For Apple, it's their icon. It might be the iPhone. It might be Steve Jobs. It's really just a symbol that represents the brand that you can kind of leverage and use in different environments. So yeah, that's kind of just a model that we work through. And really what we could talk about is why it's important. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on that? I kind of just riffed for a little while.
No, I really like it, and it forces you to kind of humanize your brand and really think about what it means, and also in an aspirational way. And there might be things that things that come to mind about your brand that you don't want to come to mind, or when you're changing who you are in the market, to like think about that. And we talk about this all the time, your current situation versus where you want to go, and identifying the gap and how to get there. And I think this is a really good exercise to go through, because it kind of is kind of inspirational, but also if you're true to your brand essence, it's possible to achieve because it's part of who you are. And so I don't know, I just really like that. But you asked kind of a good question earlier, like, why is this important? And why is it important?
Yeah. And well, first too, you made a really good comment about like, there's some things that you might uncover that aren't so good. And there's something, I won't get into it now, but there's something called like a brand audit, where you can look at positive and negative perceptions. And before you take control of the positive ones and really double down on those, you do have to address the negative perceptions, right? So like Peloton is seeing that right now. Spotify is seeing that right now as of February 11th, 2022, right? They have some negative perceptions. And so before they move forward, they have to address those, whether that's crisis management or whatever. And so that's a great point. Like, you do have to address those. But why does it matter? So when we look at a model like this, I think it is important to understand, like, this isn't just text on a page, right? It definitely starts that way. All communication does. But if you use this correctly and all of it has to offer, it really is a guiding light for all brand building and decision making when it comes to your brand, right? So that can include, this is not your positioning, by the way. This influences your positioning. This is not your messaging. This influences your messaging. It's really starting at who you are, and that influences what you do. So this can influence, again, positioning, investments, who you acquire. If you're a company, does that fit into your identity, right? All of these things are critical to make decision making easier and make building your brand a lot easier. And so, like I said, it's really helpful to define who you want to be. And the last thing I'll say, that the reason we use this model in particular too, is because there are some models that kind of force you only to looking at certain things. We like this model because it allows you to, you can look up the David Aker model, and it just allows you to observe your brand at like a 30,000 foot view and look at so many different elements and say, hey, where are we really strong? Where do we have opportunity? Where are our strengths? And so, yeah, that's kind of the why it matters, I think, and why we've used it. It's pretty important.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I guess my next question is, how can brands identify, well, how do they fill out this model, or what questions should they be asking themselves to like really think about their brand differently?
Yeah. One thing I would note too is, like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. These are not my frameworks particularly. We've had a lot of smart people in the course of history come up with these frameworks and make it easy for us. So I would say pick one that you like, that you feel like fits within your brand. We use the Aker model. There's no tie from us to him. Trust me, I've never spoken to the gentleman, but pick a framework that you feel like works in that sense. There's quite a few you can look up, brand identity models or things like that. And it'll just help you observe your brand from a variety of perspectives. But even within that, to fill those out, they may have some guiding questions, but just as a kind of, a helpful start, some of the questions I sometimes start with is like, what do you want to be known for? A lot of this is aspirational. So your leadership team, your CEO, your C-suites, your executives, what do you want to be known for? What do you want to do in the world, right? What do you want your team to look like, let's say 3 years from now, maybe 5 years from now? Even 1 year from now, go through those different timelines and say, what do you want your team to look like? What strengths do you want to have? Where do you want to invest in hiring? What do you hope to do? Right. And then also maybe like, what's the best thing about your company right now? What are the defining factors? So a lot of this is aspirational, yes, but I would also say it's a little bit of a mix, right? It's kind of going off of who you were. It's somewhat of your brand image, but you're just adding some other elements and tweaking it to who you want to be in the future. So some of it may be aspirational, A lot of it is from a conceptual idea, but a lot of it is reflecting on what are your strengths right now? What are you really, really good at? You don't want to throw that away, right? So.
Like that, it's like taking a little bit of your, like you said, who you are as a brand. It's almost like who you are as a person. What are your personal hopes and dreams and goals? Well, your company should have that too, and making sure that your brand has something to aspire to. Otherwise, it's just going to be stagnant. But
yeah, 100%, 100%.
Awesome. Well, Frank, thank you so much. This is super helpful and fun to talk about.
Yeah, hopefully these are helpful. I enjoyed too. Thanks a lot, Amanda.
Awesome. We'll see you later.
Yeah, bye.